Hopefully this last week, as you started the exercise, has been just a great learning experience for you, that you are spending time in the Gospels learning at the feet of Jesus. And what we want to do with this teaching here is just share with you what we saw, our very first learning. It happened really, really quickly. And we just want to share with you because we think it'll give some framework and some much needed context for a lot of the discussions that we're going to have moving forward. And so the very first learning that we had is that we saw this cast of characters emerge. As we were doing the exercise, the first part that just says, anyone who is following Jesus, stop and highlight it and then ask the questions. Well, as we were stopping, and what we realized is that this cast of characters emerged. And I just want to run through them briefly with you. And then we're going to talk about how Jesus kind of structured his life in relationships and what that may mean for us as we're following him. So the first one that emerged was crowds. I never would have thought that the crowds were a character. But sure enough, what you'll see over and over again in those kind of hidden transition passages that we talked about is that the crowds follow Jesus everywhere. He's constantly, even sometimes they go ahead of him and they meet and they're already there when he arrives at his destination. So it's just fascinating. They emerge as a character. And kind of there's like three subsets that kind of step out of the crowd that we meet as we go about learning, seeing Jesus' life. And the first one is just the hurting. You know, there's people that are that need healing, or maybe they are demon possessed. You'll see that a lot in there. Or just the outcast or marginalized of society. They're hurting, and they're drawn to Jesus very much so. But then the second group, this hostiles, you'll see them. They follow Jesus around very diligently, and they're hostile. They're kind of opposing his message and what he came to be about. And then you'll see that there's another group that just kind of, they're not necessarily saying that Jesus is Lord of their life or that he's even the master teacher or rabbi, but they're interested and they ask him questions. But what's a quick observation there is that Jesus' life was very attractive. People were drawn to Jesus. Even if they were against him, they couldn't stay away. And this crowd, we need to think about that. Why oftentimes in our Christian walk are people in our culture repulsed by Christians? Just interesting thought to think through. But out of that crowd, there's another level of relationships that Jesus had that's called the disciples. So you can raise your hand. I'm doing it now. If you thought the 12 were exactly correlated with the disciples. I did. But then when you're doing this exercise, you learn that there's this larger discipleship community that follows Jesus around, right? So he sends out the 72. And then in John 6:66, you'll see, you'll never forget that verse now, that it says some of the disciples, after a hard teaching, stopped following Jesus. So you'll see that there was this larger community that's anywhere from 14 to 120, kind of a larger discipleship community that followed Jesus around. But there were the 12. So there was 12 that he called out by name out of the discipling community to intentionally reproduce his life into. And then even out of that 12, there was the three, Peter, James, and John, and they had kind of special access and experiences with Jesus that the 12 didn't even have. So that's just a very brief introduction. And what we'd encourage you to do is note, what did Jesus pour in and expect out of each kind of level of relationship? Was it different? Did he give some groups different things? I think you'll see that he does. But what we want to make in this observation, the observation we want to make right now is that Jesus, he organized his relationships, he organized his life so that he was operating in these four different spaces. And what's really fascinating to me is that modern day sociologists are saying that there's actually these four different spaces that as human beings that we need to operate in, that we need to experience in order to have the fullest expression of what it means to be a human being. And Jesus, 2,000 years ago, before sociological studies, he was the master sociologist. He organized his life this way. And so we said that there was the crowds, that Jesus operated out in the crowds among the people. But then there was this other mid-sized level of discipleship, so there's anywhere from 14 to 20. But then there was the 12 that he called out by name, and then there was the 3 that he had special access to his life. And here's what's really interesting, is what I was saying about the sociologists. These are the spaces that they say, not looking at Jesus' life, just observing human behavior, that we need. That we need to operate in what they call the public sphere, that we need to have that experience. But then there's also this different dynamic that happens at a social level. And then even beyond that, the personal level, and then finally the intimate. And that we need to have all these different experiences with other people as we go about life to really understand the dynamics of what it means to be in community and have these different relationships with people. Well, Jesus structured his life that way. And what we would like for you to do is to begin to think about, as we're following in the way of Jesus, are these spaces represented in your life? Are you moving among the crowds? Are you going to where people are? Are you coming across people that need healing, that are hurting in life, that you don't know maybe, that you can help? Are there people that maybe have a different worldview than you that you need to interact with and share Jesus with? And then are people being attracted to your life, and are they exploring the life of Jesus through you? Are you going among the people? But then do you have this kind of mid-size level of impact that's happening, where there's momentum and mission and excitement that's happening, where we're part of a cause that's greater than us? That's kind of what the discipling community represented. But then are you moving in any sort of space where you're known by name? That people know your story and you know theirs. It's a very personal relationship. But then is there even something beyond that, that's this intimate space to where all of your life is open? And I mean all of your life is open and available for people. Even our deepest, darkest secrets to our biggest, wildest dreams. That someone in our life knows that. 2 to 3 people in this intimate space. So as we travel through this, again, see these spaces in Jesus' life. We're going to discuss this even more. But just for now, just see it and start to think how, as a community, we can encourage and challenge one another to incorporate these different spaces, these different relational spaces, into our life as we practice aligning our lives with the way of Jesus.